Hey, it's us again. You're All Doomed, the podcast that slices and dices its way through Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood, 13 minutes at a time. I'm your host, Brian.
I'm Party Crasher Greg.
This chunk begins with Ben conversing with Kate in the back of the van and ends with a very concerned-looking Tina. Realizing that no one was outside the van, Ben goes to investigate armed only with a party horn. Jason quickly approaches Ben from behind and crushes his head from top to bottom, one hand on top of his head, one hand underneath his jaw. Crunch.
Yeah, there's a big spurt of blood. This could have been awesomely gruesome, but it's a little bit tame. Maybe it suffered from some censoring, but it was a little bit disappointing. Ben was played by Craig Thomas, steadily working in TV with parts on ER, Charmed, Hannibal, etc. He also appeared in the Duncan Jones movie Source Code. He seems pleased by his appearance in the series and enjoys being recognized by fans. Inside the van, Kate hasn't heard any of this going on and climbs into the front seat. She sticks her head out of the driver's side window to look for Ben, whereupon Jason grabs her and shoves a party horn into her left eye. I think it even makes a little toot.
It does, like...
We get one good frame of the damage with some of the blood running down her face. It's not bad. Kate was played by Diane Almeida. She did some TV stuff, like an episode of Coach, but she also appeared in The Adventures of Ford Fairlane, oddly enough. She doesn't have any IMDb credits since 1992, but she did appear in the Crystal Lake Memories documentary to discuss her role in this series.
Inside the party house, Melissa is not enjoying her makeout session with Eddie.
Though she has at least taken off her pants.
That's true. So she is giving it a little bit of an effort. She tells him that she isn't really interested in him and that she was only hoping Nick would walk in and find them, which is kind of strange. I mean, we've talked about how Nick hasn't expressed any interest, but also why would Nick just barge into a room to find out what was going on in there? But anyway, Eddie says that he can take the rejection because he's been rejected by some of the finest science fiction magazines in the United States. So if that helps him feel better, then...
He even specifies the continental United States. So there are some science fiction publications in Alaska and Hawaii that have not yet rejected him. He storms off to take a cold shower and says he's got a date with a soap on a rope. This joke makes absolutely no sense, since I would assume he's going off to address the fact that she just blue-balled him by masturbating in the shower. Soap on a rope jokes usually involve preventing prison or camp rape. Right. So I really don't get what he meant by this.
I don't know.
Speaking of cord yanking, we get a quick shot of Jason walking over to the electrical meter outside and yanking the power cable out.
Bravo, Greg. That was a fantastic segue. Bravo. Back in the woods, Nick and Tina are still making their way back to the house, so maybe they were 5 miles away. But of course, they stumble upon Michael's body wedged in the tree. This is going to upset Nick because it's his cousin. And
he takes it surprisingly well, though.
He does, but Tina immediately recognizes Michael from her vision from earlier, but we already knew that because she had looked at the photo, but for some reason this was like final confirmation that her vision was correct.
Jason now enters the darkened party house, tracking mud all over the kitchen. Upstairs, having just finished their lovemaking, druggy David makes a really dorky caveman joke and climbs out of bed wearing red briefs, which I thought was a little bit of an odd costuming choice. He needs to get something to eat, but he stumbles over, giving Robin a chance to sit up for a really gratuitous boob shot, while she laughs for way too long at his clumsiness. To be fair, she did just say she was really stoned, so maybe she just found it much more funny than it really warranted. Armed with a flashlight, David strolls downstairs and goes through a kitchen. We get a really creepy shot of Jason lurking in a darkened corner behind him. You can barely make Jason out in the gloom, but we do get one little lightning flash. Unfortunately for David, he's facing the other way, so he doesn't see that Jason has been standing there. David even skids a little bit on the muddy floor that Jason has tracked in from outside.
David searches through the fridge for something to eat, and he grabs a stack of American cheese, which reminds me of the time that you and I met the Transformer Jazz at Kings Island. and Jazz asked camp counselor Greg what humans eat, and Greg responded, cheese.
Wow, I was cool.
So if you wonder why Transformers have a weird perception of humans, you can blame Greg.
As David crouches there selecting his perfectly appropriate snack item, he senses someone behind him, and for some reason he assumes it's Maddie. So she assumes he was outside. He now assumes that she's back and is right there, and she's the first person he thinks of. It makes absolutely no sense.
Right, because Maddie has not really made any indication to David himself that she's interested. So why would David think that Maddie's even looking for him at all? It's a very strange response.
In any case, he's wrong because it's Jason who guts him with an enormous chef's knife. He falls to the floor, instantly dead. And we get a shot of this large knife sticking out of his belly. David was played by John Renfield. He came up through television and some TV movies. No credits since a short film later in 1988, and no real footprint online either, so not a ton about this guy.
I did find a Twitter profile that's attached to him. It only has 36 followers, and the bio says, "Life's too short to eat bad grilled cheese," which is interesting, and that he's a chef, photographer, actor, massage therapist, and loves animals.
All right.
But I do believe that bad grilled cheese is probably a reference to him grabbing cheese out of the fridge.
Or perhaps that was an improv, when he chose what to grab out of the fridge, he, the actor, is the one that chose to grab all the cheese.
Meanwhile, Nick and Tina have finally made it back to Tina's house, and they head upstairs, and Tina says that her dad used to keep a gun in his office. So they head into the room, and while she's looking for the gun, she finds the spike that Dr. Cruz hid from her, and she's not very happy about this development, but she also does find the gun in the drawer and hands it to Nick.
It's hilariously unsecured. It's sitting right next to a stapler and a glass jar, almost like it's just a 3-hole punch or something in his desk drawer. But in fact, it's a Lama Especial 22 LR Mini, based on the Colt M1911. It's got a 3.75-inch barrel length. I really like the look on her face as she hands the gun to Nick. It's almost like a pacifist's disgust at wielding this deadly weapon.
Yeah, you take this. I don't want it. But as she's scrounging around in the desk drawer, she also finds a book with some newspaper clippings in it. And one of them says mass murder at Camp Crystal Lake. And the other one says killer at Crystal Lake, body never recovered. These might sound very familiar because they're the same newspaper clippings that we saw from the final chapter. So once again, we've got people that live on Camp Crystal Lake and for some reason are keeping these mementos of these brutal murders that happened there years earlier.
Granted, she was a very little girl when all of this would have been going on, and maybe as part of her therapy growing up, no one ever told her about the terrible things that had also happened in the Crystal Lake area. But yeah, it is pretty funny that she's another person who learns all about Jason through skimming news articles. And she realizes that it was him that she revived in the lake. So now they have a name for their foe. This causes her to panic, which starts everything in the room shaking. Nick realizes that it's Tina causing this quaking, and so he's now fully on board with her telekinetic powers. We get a quick shot on the wall of a framed photo of an Atlas rocket launch. I scoured the internet trying to find the details on this exact launch, but it was virtually impossible.
At the party house, Eddie is downstairs reading Michael's birthday cards for some reason, and he's using some weird handheld sound effects machine, which I presume is his, or maybe it was a gift for Michael, but he's using it to scan the presents like some kind of like sci-fi, scanning device. And after getting the readings that he was looking for, he grabs one of the presents and opens it, and it says personal penis enlarger, and he opens the box and it's a magnifying lens. Oh, these guys are hilarious.
While he's doing that, Melissa sneaks past behind him and goes outside. He doesn't know that she's there, but he's reading a birthday card that she had written to Michael, and refers to her as a cunt. Really harsh. I mean, yeah, she was totally a bitch to him upstairs, but that's just a term that we haven't heard in this movie and goes pretty far in a nasty direction.
Yeah, it's a dark side of Eddie that we hadn't seen before. After he says that, Jason sneaks up behind Eddie, and Eddie thinks it is Melissa and asks her without turning around if, she had changed her mind. But Jason has not changed his mind. He chops down on Eddie's neck with some sort of machete-like weapon and takes care of Eddie once and for all.
Yeah, there's a really great chopping sound effect. Eddie was played by Jeff Bennett, who also showed up in Freddy's Nightmares, also on Charles in Charge. He then went on to appear in a sitcom on NBC called Roomies, starring Burt Young and Corey Haim. It came out in 1987, was only on for one season, and I didn't even know it existed. It's about a 42-year-old Marine sergeant and a 14-year-old fish-obsessed genius.
Who played who?
They strike up a perfect and reciprocal balance as college freshman roommates. I can see why it was probably only on for one season. Jeff Bennett has had no credits on IMDb since 1993, but I did see one source online stating that he works in animation. Over at the Shepherd house, Nick insists that he wants to gather everyone up so that they can leave safely, while Tina mutters about her mother being stuck back in the woods, which is where Nick and Tina just came from.
Mm-hmm. Jason has now made his way upstairs at the party house. Robin has gotten bored waiting for David to come back with the American cheese slices, so she makes her way into the hall to look for him. All the other bedroom doors are either locked or nobody is answering, but David's room is unlocked, so she goes in and she hears something in the closet. It's a cat!
She opens the door and we get a goddamn jumping cat scare. We have not seen any evidence that there's a cat in this house, so has it been closed up in the closet this whole time?
It seems so.
It's so cheap.
Robin decides to sit on a little bench to pet the cat, which is not a euphemism, and she places her hand down on the bench and notices it's wet and then sees that it's blood. David's head has been strategically placed directly next to where she was sitting. At this point, Jason barges into the room and chucks Robin out the window. It's pretty underwhelming. She just kind of falls from the second floor and actually lands on her feet before crumbling to the ground, but apparently it's enough to kill her.
I have a couple of things to say about this sequence. First of all, the cat that she's cradling while sitting on the window bench is very obviously trying to get away from her. I don't know if it doesn't like being petted or just didn't like the actress, but I felt bad for this poor little creature. The decapitated human head that is supposed to be David is utterly terrible. It does not look the least bit real. I wasn't even sure it was supposed to be David because it's not identifiable as anybody. And then, most egregiously, the person who is defenestrated through the window is very clearly a stunt man wearing a wig. It was a reshoot, and in fact was reshot at the house that they used for the Jarvis house in part 4, the final chapter. But it's once you know it's a stunt man, it's hilariously obvious that it's not the actress. And yeah, I agree. It's a pretty tame thump to the ground. I'm surprised it killed her. Robin was played by Elizabeth Keighton, a Hungarian-born actress model who came to the United States at age 8 and wound up in some stuff like Silent Night, Deadly Night 2 and Assault of the Killer Bimbos.
You're forgetting a number of other S-movie credits that she has, including Scandalous Simone, Savage Dawn, Slave Girl from Beyond Infinity, Silent Madness, and South Beach Academy.
She's really racking up that alphabet. After this, she appeared in the movie Twins and Spy Hard with Leslie Nielsen. It looks like she retired from acting in 1999.
You mentioned that Robin being thrown out the window was a pickup scene, and that's because she was originally killed with a machete through her stomach, but due to the movie being heavily censored, her death scene ended up being changed to her being thrown out the window. So that's probably why it's so kind of underwhelming, as they probably had to do it at the last minute.
Not to mention kind of de-bloodify it.
This is going to sound like we're kidding here, but Tina tells Nick that she senses her mom is in the woods, so they leave the house to go back to the woods. Nick says that they're going to go find her, but first they need to go gather everyone up so they can leave together. And Tina tells Nick to go find everybody, and so she'll stay at the house in case her mom comes back, even though she just said she senses her in the woods, but whatever.
Yeah, so the chunk ends with Tina and Nick arguing about who should stay behind and wait in the off chance that Tina's mom comes back to the house. On a production note, for some reason I did so much slow motion that watching this chunk took me 3 times longer than normal. We lost 5 people this time: Ben, Kate, David, Eddie, and Robin.
For more exciting action of Tina running into the woods and then running back to the house and then running back to the woods, you're just going to have to tune in next week to another episode of You Are All Doomed.